Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is Kushalmehra. Today, we're going to talk about yet another book. Today's book is called Bell the Cat, and I have the author with me, Tony. How are you doing?
Hi, Kushal. I'm good.
So, this is very interesting. This is first of this kind. I've never done a book on very specific examinations.
Okay.
So, this is your first time on the podcast. So, I would request you to tell everybody a little bit about you, your background, where you're coming from, why you've written this book, so that people get accustomed to. Because I usually discuss all sorts of subjects, but never discussed an examination in my life.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. My name is Tony Xavier, and I was born and raised in Visakhapatnam. So, like everybody born and raised in South India, engineering is the thing that you take up. There was absolutely no choice and no awareness also. It's also the fact that there are no good arts colleges also that you hear of, right? Like in the north. So there's no aspiration level that way. So did my engineering, and when you don't like your engineering, the next thing you do is an MBA. I took the CAT, I got into IIM Lucknow. I absolutely love clothes. So I thought I'll sell something I like. And that's how I joined the Aditya Birla Group in their fashion division. So Louis Philippe, Van Heusen, Alan Solly, I was the area sales manager for those brands. But eventually I figured that I don't like selling anything. But the thing is that in India from childhood, whenever you're growing up, there is only one goal put in front of you, not with a, consciously or subconsciously, which is to do well in school and marks and tests. And somehow I absolutely loved it. I never liked skipping school. I was as competitive as any sportsman would be in their own field. So I absolutely enjoyed taking exams. So eventually after that, after the Altavilla group, a friend of mine suggested that, maybe, you should try this out. There's an opening in this firm called IMS, which is India's first test prep firm. I also had used that content a long time back to make questions. And just on a whim, I thought, okay, let me give this a shot because I thought I won't fit into sales at all. So that's how I started in 2006 with IMS. I started designing content. And since then, every year, whatever happens or the other, I keep taking the exam, the CAT. Apart from that, I've taken the GMAT twice, the GRE once. So if you say that I'm a product of what typical Indian society is in terms of the expectation. So it's something that hoop jumping, I call myself a expert hoop jumper because that's what we're expected to do. But after you jump out of all the hoops, it's not necessarily that unless you have a career plan or whatever, because you don't really think about career. You're just supposed to clear tests, right? So that's how I got in. And I also was I've done various roles there. I was teaching and I was first designing content and syllabus. Then I got bored with it after a long time of that. So I thought, let me get down to the ground. So I ran the IMS franchise in Chennai for 4 years. And now I'm back to the head office. I'm the chief learning officer. So I take care of the pedagogy, technology, and everything post sales of the students' experience with us. So that's what I do. Yeah. And this
So,
book, yeah.
yeah, so I just had a question here before we get into your
Yeah.
explanation for the book. So, do you think there's a lot of criticism of India being a rote learning and mark obsessed society, and that's unhealthy? Where do you stand on that spectrum?
See, I think the exams can be better designed, in the sense that the exams are challenging in the sense. So, which is because people know that there is a lot of rote learning and stuff. And so, of late, there's a lot of grade inflation also back from the day when I was in school. It was not easy to get a 90, 95, 98 in 10th and 12th and all of that. But now I think there's grade inflation and rote learning and everything. I do feel, I think rote learning doesn't solve anything. So, yeah, I'm on that front only that, you wouldn't. But memory per se is not bad in the sense that one needs a memory to always, if we're talking with each other, like I have to have some amount of memory, for example, to recall, say, hey, that book I read, have you seen that movie, that actor? For everything, I can't pull out, my phone and keep checking stuff. So memory itself is important. But should it be a part of exams and should exams be completely memory based is something which is, I don't think that, that does anything because to answer your question, students who do exceptionally well in school don't actually, when they join us, there is no correlation on their ability to crack aptitude tests.
So, here's the thing: rote learning. Now, as someone who consumes a lot of books on a yearly basis and then tends to, formulate arguments on the basis of books, I think rote learning is a skill that has been very handy to me personally in my life.
Hmm.
Where like a lot of times there are occasions, if I'm having a conversation and somebody will be like, how do you remember this? I was like, I don't know. It's just stored in my memory bank
Yeah,
and I don't know where
absolutely.
it goes.
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
the moment I talk about that subject, suddenly I get an image of the book that I had read and then I can recall where I had read that.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's
And
called eidetic memory, if I'm not wrong.
yeah, I have
That's
no
what the
clue
word.
what it is called.
Yeah,
All I know
that's
is
the
that I'm
word.
able to
Yeah,
do it.
yeah. You see it. Yeah, yeah. I also used to do it in school. I would see acha biology ke book mein it was on the right side, top right hand
Yeah.
corner. Yeah, yeah. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but if you ask me to remember birth dates and names and all that riff-raff, I don't
Yeah.
remember
Okay.
anything.
Okay. Yeah.
That I don't remember. So I'm so bad. In fact, when it comes to book names, I forget the book name. I'll
Oh,
remember the
okay.
book
Okay.
content.
Okay.
So
So I think when you get immersed in something, that's when you remember stuff, I suppose.
yeah, so
That's
I
something.
guess that's the case in me. So I've always been kind of on the borderline. I was like, we should not completely throw rote learning away in totality because I think that would be a net loss
Yeah,
because we
yeah,
do need rote learning till
yeah,
some extent. I think it does help. Yeah, in math
yeah.
and science, you don't. Math and science are like pure skills based, where you just basically create a logical representation of everything.
Yeah,
So I don't
yeah.
know where I stand on this. It's almost as if nowadays the discussion is you have to either pick this or that. Why can't you have both?
So I think for me, I think false binary. I call the world is full of false binaries where it's everything because world is way more complex than a yes or a no or an either. I think it's always many variables go into something. So, for example, I would, if you're asking me only to regurgitate what I've learned, it doesn't make sense because I I'm supposed to know the formula of a circle, for example, because it's a very basic thing as an engineer or as a math student to know. But if only that gives me the answer, then we're testing rote learning. But how do you use what you know becomes important, Because there's always a certain amount of stuff that we should carry in our hard drive, I suppose. Everything can't be uploaded to the cloud in that sense where you know, but I feel it's something where the tests can be better designed. Let me put it that way. Whether you need to
Exactly.
remember stuff or not is a separate thing.
Yeah, it's just like when we grew up, I'm sure you used to remember phone numbers. Like I remember my first phone numbers.
Yeah,
I remember that.
absolutely.
I
Yeah,
don't remember any numbers today. I remember the numbers of my cars in my childhood and my college
yeah,
days.
yeah,
At times I struggle to remember the number of my own car now. I don't
yeah, yeah,
remember it.
yeah.
I have to
Absolutely.
look it
But
up.
the
But I remember
first
all my
landline
original
number,
cars.
first landline number, घर का landline number you would remember. But I
Yeah.
remember that. But no, which was there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
So now I'm sorry I had to cut you there when we were discussing. You were about to make a point about your book. So now if you could circle back to your book, now
Hmm.
how did this idea come up?
So what used to happen when I was in Chennai, we were running a center. So bulk of our students training with us are for the CAT and the MBA in India. That's the exam and the other MBA exams. So every day in the evening when I'd be sitting, my center would be like a doctor's clinic from 5 onwards, where people would call, book appointments, and students would be lined up. So and most of the questions that were asked were not about the verbal and the math or the subject, but my work is getting really hectic. Can I quit my job and prepare for this? So this is my profile. Will I get a call from the good calls or how do I? So it was everything that is not covered in class. We cannot cover in class. Then I figured the students were traveling great distances, sometimes an hour and a half to come meet me for half an hour, and everybody typically tended to have the same questions. So I thought, why to do this? So I thought I'll start a blog. I made an entire list of all the things that, from the first 2 years of me being there, students ask, because how far does the apple fall from the tree eventually? So that, and that's how, I started the blog so that the common questions they can read and the second meeting can become the first meeting, where something is very specific only to them and not necessarily to the general population. So that's how I started the book. Yeah.
Now, uh, I would say chapters are different because your book writing style was like kind of unique. Now you've divided your book into small sub chapters, very small chapters, like 2 pages,
Hmm,
3 pages, 5 pages.
hmm,
That kind of
hmm,
the
hmm,
writing
hmm,
style is very, very different. Let's say
hmm,
from the standard writing style. Sorry, but I'm
hmm,
asking this question. Why
hmm.
why did you choose this style? Like three pages, four pages chapters?
See, what I was looking at is that when students come to were asking me, they came with a very specific question, right? So, should I quit my job to prepare for an MBA? Right now, whatever I need to do to cover that is one this thing. So, I didn't want to then because it's like a more like if you can say it's like a essay form of FAQs, you can say, with other things thrown in. So that's why I chose that. Yeah.
All right. So basically, what for the viewers who have not read the book and want to buy the book is actually a very good way. It was a very easy read when I was reading it. Right. It is like it's 300 odd pages. I don't remember the exact number. I think it was 320
Yeah.
or something. I don't
Yeah.
remember the
Yeah.
exact.
Yeah.
So I apologize for that. But what I noticed was like, okay, one question, this answer, one question, this answer, one question, this
Yeah.
answer. It was like, short essays. So was there a flow or something of that sort, or how was the design ultimately decided?
So first, when I just set out on this whole exercise of, let me start a blog for the students, right? I sat and Googled the hell out of how to become a really good blogger. So the first thing they said that the title should be absolutely clear as to what you're going to get inside. Short paragraphs, very, very clear subtitles. So what I thought was that students start preparing about 18 months in advance, roughly, and on average, say 10 months in advance if the exam happens in the end of November. And the queries that they have keep changing as they grow closer to the exam. So I first sat and made a list of the entire set of questions that they'll have in sequence. Right. So right before the exam, the chapters become very, very different. So I did that entire title writing for one post a week and 52 posts. And I used to sit and spend the first half of my week, Monday morning, was that sitting and writing. And which is why if you see the first part, a lot of it goes into why do you want to do an MBA and do you
Yeah.
know the larger plan?
Now, this is my experience.
Hmm.
See, I never went for the CAT exam, but GMAT एक बार try किया था. I had tried once, but did not do well. I was just not driven enough to do anything, and I just didn't do very
Okay.
well. And I remember being very disappointed that I did so badly. I will never forget that day. I felt like shit, but I mean, I'm sorry, it was nobody else's fault. It was my fault. I did not do a good job. I mean, I sucked at it. So it's like that. But one thing I often wanted to ask as a question to everyone is the kind of pressure associated with these examinations. The pressure. Let's spend some time on that.
Yeah,
See,
absolutely.
how to crack it is a different thing.
Separate.
That there are methods, and you have beautifully explained like how to do a math problem and stuff like that. Like something I would struggle with math. So I actually found that to be very useful. Maybe you should have written it when I used to.
Yeah, because nobody does any process.
Yeah. So, but the mental pressure, which is also part societal, part in your own self-created demons. Is there like, do students come and like what, a person like me, what if I fail? Have you ever encountered that and tried to deal with that?
Actually, a lot of it. So, there are so many pressures. For example, a student of mine, she came in, and this is the classic question that is there. So I said, so before the exam, she was taking the GMAT as well. So she had by the time had like 4 to 5 years of experience in sales. So 27, 28 years old and planning to do the GMAT. And I saw that she was really hyperventilating, lots of pressure. And I was like, hey, tests are something where you have to be calm, to take a test because it's a mental exercise. So if you're so, amped up, I don't think it's the right thing. And then you won't believe, Kushal, but it's never happened. But this student had launched into me. She's like, it's very easy for you to say to stay calm. Do you know my life? I'm 27 years old. I've done sales. I've been in Chennai all my life. If I don't get this, my parents will get me married off. And my life just ends here, So it's very easy for you to, say all of this. So my immediate response is I calm down because when somebody, launches into you, you just get, I was like, yeah, I understand. But the question does not care. The question is saying A and B are walking towards each other. So a lot of the pressure is societal actually, and in terms of where your life is, and family in India still plays a huge role in terms of. I think the biggest luck that I had growing up that there was no pressure from the family side. My parents had jobs and had to take care of three kids, and so that was their jam. They had to do that, right? They had so we could you either do well in school or you don't well in school do well in school, So they were not also say private service professionals, so who know, okay, you have to get into an IIT. So thankfully, I had zero pleasure, whereas a lot of students have parental pleasure. So that is one. Yeah.
Yeah, I really wanted to ask this question is because this is something that I don't know. I mean, so in my own life case, I did not do well in the GMAT, did not end up going to any university, but then funny enough, got into a university in another place. Then my American visa gets cancelled. Then
Okay,
I end up
okay,
going to Canada. I I
okay,
I
okay.
I did not really want to live there, so come back from
Hmm, hmm,
Canada.
hmm,
Then
hmm,
finally I had this regret. No, I should have studied more. Then I joined
hmm.
IGNU of all the places,
Okay, okay,
and I
okay.
finished
Hmm,
philosophy
hmm,
masters. And
hmm,
then I
hmm,
was like, okay, now I did my
hmm.
masters kind of a thing.
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah. Hmm,
and
hmm, hmm.
the funny bit is, I did not even write the exam. I just wanted to
Okay,
pass my masters. That's all. To
okay, that's
me, it
it. Yeah,
was like, man, in my head, I was like, I did it. I did my
yeah,
masters kind of a
yeah,
situation. I would just go there because at the age of 40 odd, sitting
yeah,
in that wooden bench of an examination center was
yeah, yeah,
really not very kind on my butt. So I was
yeah,
like,
yeah,
okay, what am I doing here? So I would just
yeah.
write. If there's a 3 hour examination, I would write for 2.5 hours and get the hell out of there. I was like, I can't
Okay, okay.
but
Nice, nice,
but I
nice.
cleared it. I got my master's in philosophy, albeit
Nice.
from IGNOU.
Congratulations. Yeah.
So for me, that's why I wanted to ask you this question, because I went through something of this sort when it came to this exam. Now, stupid question: which one is tougher, IAS or CAT?
See, I would definitely say IAS, matlab, it's definitely tougher in the sense that for CAT, you use everything that you've learned all through school, right? There, at some level, you learn the math, you learn, yeah. But the civil services exam is something where, you have to acquire like a huge amount of information, which is new. So I've known, say, so at the IIMs, there is a trend now of at least 10 to 15 people from after the MBA, there is the UPSC because that makes them, they can really perform better in the civil services, and they've also acquired the managerial skills of, say, management of preparation. So I know a guy who he would teach part time for me at a while because he had quit his job and he just went underground for 6 to 8 months to prepare for UPSC.
Wow.
After this guy was from IMA. And I think right now he's a DSP or or a very super senior position because he cracked the IPS and in the Northeast, if I'm not wrong. So if somebody like that has to just go underground for 6 to 8 months, I think it means that it is quite tough. As I don't think for CAT you need to go underground for 6 to 8 months. So yeah.
Now, for the book, I don't want to discuss the math bits, and because I think
Yeah, yeah,
then that's giving away the book, and I don't want to give away the
yeah,
book.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I only want to focus on part 7, mind over matter, mental
yeah.
conditioning, because that I think um, a is a very crucial part, and I want to focus there is because
Hmm,
I found
hmm,
that very interesting when
hmm,
I was
hmm,
reading that, right? Like you
hmm,
talk
hmm.
about the CAT is really not as tough as you think. In reality, you do not need a 99.5. Now that was honestly, even when I read the title, right,
Maths
that was so
title.
counterintuitive to me.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So let's focus there and take your
That,
time and explain this, because a lot of children just go through the depression of "Arey mere se to hoga hi nahi," kind of, I can't do
yeah,
this.
yeah, so I think if we look at it, because we use this word percentile, which is the percentage of people who are below you, right? Then it becomes a case of, say, acha, you need, and there are X number of seats, right? So if there are, say, altogether 5,500 or 6,000 seats at the IIMs, and for every seat they call 4 people, right? So roughly 15 to 20,000 people, and if there are 2.5, 3 lakh people, you have to be in the top 1%. Right? Now that seems like a daunting task. But actually, if you look at the paper and the percentage of marks that you need to get, it's only about 50%. You get 50% of the full marks, you'll get that 99. So that numbers play a huge part. And again, we know this huge thing. I think I break this down, right? Now, out of 2.5 lakh people, even say, or maybe 50, 20 to 30,000 don't even take the exam. It's a no-show on the exam day. Among the rest of the people, if I look at how many people seriously prepare, see, at least join or pay money for prep, that's around a lakh 20, right? So that is one. Now, out of these lakh 120 who join a test prep company for learning, or it's very similar to people who join a gym. How many people who join the gym stick through the whole program? So even in our program and anywhere else, I would broad base it to just 50%. Number of people who take a mock test super seriously, every single test is only 15,000. So you're technically the number that you are competing against is only the 15,000 people who are super serious and putting the yards in. And there are no geniuses in the rest of the crowd because it's this IIT crowd or the students from good colleges who are really serious are part of this 15,000. So if I talk about 99.5 and all of that, it seems like a huge thing because it's 99.5 out of 2.5 lakh. But what you need to do is in the 20,000 serious people, you need to be in the top 5,000, which is because काफी लोग मैदान में होते ही नहीं, right? It's exactly like a gym, right? So now out of this people who seriously come to a gym, and if you also go to that for 6 months to a year and you put in the yards, you will reach your best. Yeah. So that's how it is. So it seems counterintuitive because what's the real competition is what you need to.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Now, again, I can only share through my experience in life. Now, when I do a book podcast, like I have a rule: I read every book I do a podcast on, where it's just a rule and no research assistants. All books are read by me, and I cover them, and I make my notes and I do stuff. Now, I'll share my style. Why I tend to study or read things or do whatever before I'm about to do that task, whether it's an exam or whether it's a podcast. I have the same method. I tend to read it very the week off or 5 days before because I feel I tend to remember it the best. Obviously, in the case of math and science, that can't work. So before somebody says, I myself am accepting that. But in the case of a lot of subjects,
absolutely,
I feel like if I do it like a week before, I tend to remember. Like even with your book, I read it before. I knew when we were recording, so I read it before that so that I can recall this. But is that a wrong method in terms of CAT or something?
When I was preparing for my engineering exams, I started my prep just a few months before the exams because a lot of it was memory based, right? As in a lot of the subjects were memory based. But something like the CAT, for example, is very, very skill based. Right? And skill based in the sense that if I want to teach somebody as to how do you solve reading comprehension, I don't think I'll teach for more than 3 hours. That's it. It's like driving a car. Start karo, first mein dalo, clutch chhod do, you go ahead. Now, from there to becoming an expert driver, it's completely your skill, right? And once you learn how to drive a car, you won't actually forget how to drive a car. Right? You're more or less, there. So it's like that. And if you're going for an MBA and if you have to remember profit percent kya hai formula, that's also a problem, right? But that's not nice. So that is why aptitude tests, it's more a skill-based thing which takes time to prepare. Because if you're somebody from a vernacular background, right, and they're preparing for the verbal sections, it will be very tough for them, right? For somebody from a commerce background preparing for the math bit to acquire the skills. So memory doesn't play a role, barely a very small role because the speed to do it also is developed over time. Yeah.
So what is the sweet spot? Let's say, so there is no one standard rule, right? So as you said, this is a horses for courses kind of a rule. Also, it also depends on the personality. Like, should a person do every day a few hours every day? Like, is there a universal rule? Like some people are more disciplined. Like in my case, one of my strengths is that I'm a disciplined person. So I tend to read 3 hours every day, whether any book, any sort of book. Like I'll spend a good 3 to 4 hours reading. I will brush up, whether it's newspaper, book, anything of that sort. I will read. And
Hmm.
I have now, for me, what I have observed is this is like actually going to a gym and exercising. Even any
Absolutely.
habit is like a muscle memory for me, and I tend to
Yeah,
do
yeah,
it. So does
yeah.
that, having that sort of a discipline, help one in preparing for a CAT exam?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think for anything, it's the same thing, right? With your I think that's the best. I really like preparing a lot for anything because having a goal and preparing sincerely for it. The goal can be just that, even if it's that I read every day, I read a lot, so on a daily basis. So that is also something that I systematically do in the sense that, that's the first thing I'll do after I wake up. I'll never watch a video. I'll never read the news. I'll read the book I'm supposed to read because I know that's my freshest time, when I'm absolutely, fresh. So I think discipline always helps in everything. As in, that's something in being regular. So I keep telling my students also that, it doesn't matter the duration every day that you prepare. It can be that you're busy with work or whatever. Right? But whatever you decide, you can decide that I'm only going to prepare once a week for the next 3 months because my work schedule is busy, but hit that once a week. That really helps a lot. It's the regularity that helps, not necessarily say every day 3-4 hours minimum, because that you have to end at the same place, but where each person begins is different. Yeah. But doing things regularly is definitely something I like. It's like a riyaz only. Everything else is you know yeah.
So how much should be the speed at which you should revisit the stuff you have learned in CAT? Like, what is the sweet spot? It purely depends on your memory and ability to retain
There is
stuff.
very little. See, for example, reading comprehension, there is nothing for you to remember, right? They give you new passages and you have to answer questions. So honestly, there is no memory. Right? If you're very, very well read, and suppose the word postmodernism or anthropocene, these things come in, you automatically know what it means. You know the entire, say, what you call, history behind that word because you've read enough articles on the age of the Anthropocene and all of that. So in reading comprehension, you don't need to remember anything. The only thing you will remember is what is already there in your system from everything that you've read, right? The other section is data interpretation, logical reasoning. Logical reasoning is puzzles, so there is nothing to remember there. But the only thing that is there is math, where you need to remember or revise. It's a function of two things. I feel that after a point, whatever is the basic math that is there, maybe X number of things you should know. It is like, isn't a chef won't practice chopping onions every day, right? So you're supposed to know a few things. He might forget, say, some specific chemical reaction that he needs to create or composition for some specific cuisine. But you'll know the basics, right? So I think that is something which is, because if you're looking at, my friends who are in business, for example, who are not MBAs, they'll still be able to do the percentages, itna taka upar, itna taka niche, all of that they're doing naturally only, right? So a certain amount of things you need to know. Things which are not necessarily useful in your everyday life, like geometry, for example, as everyday life as an MBA. Maybe that you'd need to revise. Right? But there is a
Fair enough.
core thing that arithmetic is something that you need to really remember. And it's also a life skill, I feel. But it depends on which career you're doing. But if you're going into business, or if you're going into finance, if you want to get into all of that, I think a certain amount of mathematical aptitude is par for the course, I suppose. Because the one other thing, Kushal, is that the courses are very, very heavy in a B school. So the first year courses have a lot of math in them as well. You know. So I remember there's a student of mine, as was somebody who wrote a post on Quora saying, I want to get into IIM Ahmedabad, but whenever I open the books, I feel sleepy. And I just can't do. So I just fall asleep. So I'm like, maybe this is not the right thing for you because the MBA program also maybe you'll fall asleep because they're not going to tell you stories about Steve Jobs all the time. That's not the program, where you're getting to hear stories about business heroes. There's a lot of learning, reading, solving. So maybe you won't enjoy that as well as what what I told the person. You should try something else was my yeah.
Yeah, so actually, I did wanted to ask you this question also. Like, how and when do you know you're not cut out for it? And how do you deal with what happens is at times the disappointment related to it, the societal pressure, "Arey log kya kahenge" kind of a situation. People will judge me, etc., etc. All that pressure that is associated, in our society, because academic excellence is given a lot of
Absolutely.
value in our
Yeah.
society. People value
Yeah.
academic excellence. So
Yeah.
how does one deal with that pressure? Like, what if I'm not cut out for cat? Like, what
Yeah,
about that
I
bit?
think so. I think at some point of time, students realize that. I think one of the things that one needs to realize is, at some level you should enjoy. I think enjoy is the wrong word because it's like follow your passion. I'm not talking in that sense. As in, do you like enjoy some bit of this whole process? Do you like so? Because the students I've seen who succeed, including say, when I was preparing, I actually enjoyed doing this stuff. So if you're not enjoying it, at least some part of it, you might not naturally be good at everything, but some part of it, if you don't enjoy, that's a big signal for you that okay, this is not my cup of tea, right? Like, so that's how So that is one way of figuring out. Another way of figuring out is like for example, when I did my engineering, I had great marks. Because comparative, so you have memory and you can solve problems. So a mechanical engineer, so I could do everything from a book, but I really sucked at the actual part of mechanical engineering, which is like three-dimensional thinking, right? You have to imagine engines and pistons. So I realized I didn't have any sort of three-dimensional thinking at all, despite scoring very good marks. Whereas my friends actually liked it. They enjoyed going to that mechanical engineering workshop, wearing khaki pants and doing that. Whereas I absolutely didn't enjoy it. So I think how you feel during something and what do you think comes naturally to you, and what is the thing in the job later also that you would need to do, right? So I figured that I wouldn't like sales, at some level. I felt that yeah, I could communicate. I had no problems communicating, striking up friendships with random strangers and cracking jokes with them, which are typically considered things, right? If you're supposed to be good at sales, maybe sit and drink with people also and, have all of that, chai pio. But I realized that that part didn't matter, to me. I had those skills, but I would really not like to sell. No, no. So these skills don't really always add up to sales. I think if one actually looks at what will one do later, so the process and the outcome later, if there is no enjoyment, I think it's it's something which is yeah, that's a big signal. But yeah, the disappointment of social expectation and all is yeah, it's a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So your first chapter is actually comparing it with cricket, but
yeah.
in part seven,
Mm,
the seventh chapter, you talk about getting ready for the exam. So
mm,
is there any, like, again, another thing that everybody has faced is like 10th standard boards, 12th standard
mm,
boards,
mm, 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 mm,
and the pressure associated with that, the
mm,
amount of pressure people feel. Like, I've
mm.
seen students shivering also, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and they just freeze when
yeah,
they go to the examination hall, and they
yeah,
just freeze, completely frozen.
yeah.
So how does one deal with the pressure of that?
I think because I've written everything from what I've taught my students, what I've experienced myself as well. So for example, pressure starts with outcome-based thinking. What happens if I don't get, right? So like that student who said, if I don't get this, then it's only marriage and everything else. So thinking about the outcome. So when I was taking the GMAT the second time, this time a company was paying for it, I was driving towards the test center. I started, my legs started shivering a bit, with like cut. And because I was like, what if I don't score the same as the exact score that I did 10 years ago? I'm 10 years older now, than then. What if everybody will think in the company, because the time company is paying, they will know the score. Are ye buddha ho gaya, he can't know, what you call, he's not as sharp. But then immediately I told myself, let me start thinking about the outcome. Let me think about what I teach my students, right? When I encounter a question, what is the process to solve that question? So I went back into the process and like, if you solve every question the way you teach your students, you also will get a good score. Don't think about the outcome. So that's something that is very, very important instead of not thinking about the outcome, but coming back to what are the things that you need to execute during those, 2 hours. So always come back to the process. I remember once some IPL long time back, Dhoni was asked about this thing. He's like, we have to travel so much, play so much. You just follow the process. I'm not really bothered whether we win or not. We just have to do what we need to do as a process, because if I'm thinking about that, it creates a lot of, yeah, that's why see sportsmen also have music in their ears and everything, so that their mind is so that they are not thinking about outcomes. It's easier said than done. I do understand that it's easier said than done, but unfortunately, there is no other option. You know, you and एक और चीज है कुशल, which I feel that when I write in the book also, that बचपन से when we talk about tests, कैसे गया? अरे बहुत अच्छा गया, easy था बहुत, right? Yeah. So, but the fact is that that means you didn't get tested, right? We are constantly asked to give an account of our skills, of what have you learned and what do you know, right? So, it's called a test match over 5 days where your skills get tested and everything else. So, I think once you know that, okay, the job will be tough. So, that whole thing of power of visualization that sportsmen go through, right, in terms of saying that, okay, the match will go into this particular point, this is what will happen, and this is what I will do. I think talking to yourself a lot, thinking about the processes, those things really matter, rather than thinking about what will my parents say. If I don't get this, if I don't do it this time, I'm stuck with my same boss who's horrible. I thought I'll fling my admit card in his face and walk off from this job, but that's not, so yeah, that's what I would say. I'm not thinking about outcomes. Yeah.
Now I want to spend the time on that one page you've written in the epilogue in the end, that
Mm,
the second
mm.
chapter where you say
Yeah,
motivation is a myth. So
yeah,
now,
yeah, yeah.
uh, so basically you've criticized this entire self-help motivation, all that
Yeah,
riffraff. I mean, I,
yeah,
I
yeah,
have
yeah.
I have actually gone on record and said, self-help is psychology ki homeopathy, and I did not take any
Absolutely,
credit.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so, and I think people have made a lot of money selling this churn to people, but I want to know your views because you have shared your views in a short one pager on the in the book. So what do you make of this entire, let me help you, I will tell you, I will show this, about all of that?
Uh, I say that motivational myth is the last slide after I teach students for 8 hours. So they think, okay, I thought because I think I can help you clear this exam. Motivation is not my jam, because I've seen you only do things because of two reasons. Either you love something, or you will die if you don't do it. Right. So the doctor tells you, hey, you're pre-diabetic, you better start walking. Right. And you start walking, going to the gym, because there is no option now, right? And so maybe you wouldn't do that if you didn't have a family and a child, but so okay, I have my daughter, I need to think about my daughter. If I'm pre-dime, I have to think about my son, right? So, or we love doing that. These are the only two reasons why we will, do something. Now, in this time when you really have no other option, your back is to the wall and you have to do it. If, say, a book comes across, you're already primed to do it. You will act, right? Then, or say a motivational book comes across, you will go through and do that, because there is no other, option. It is that, I don't know if the example is appropriate, but if you have just one matches ki tili left, you will light it. You will ensure that everything goes into it and you will ensure that it is lit. Right. So motivation does not play any role otherwise, because you need to be in that space where you're absolutely enjoying something. Because say, for example, I read a lot of Indian philosophy, and when you read it, you feel absolutely calm, as if you've understood how the world works and everything. But it doesn't really pan out later, right? Unless you're sitting and meditating every day, right? So it's only the action that will count. The books, because it's not just a motivation books. I was reading this book on Chinese philosophy called Vital Nourishment by, it's one of Siegel's publications. And I felt really good. I was reading the book. I felt I was like getting very deep and I was feeling very calm and everything. But and I thought I really understood a lot, about how to be and how Chinese look at ways of being. But 1 week after that, in my real life, where as opposed to my reading life, because I haven't been practicing the meditation or anything else, that book and me are not the same, right? So these are temporary highs that you get. in terms of, yeah, for example, there is this very famous book called The Secret or something, I suppose, where that not supposed to take names of books, but in general. So they say you visualize everything, write everything down, and things will happen. Basically, what you're doing is you're acting, right? And if you act and focus on things, it will happen. So it's not like it's a specific. Yeah, so that's why I feel motivation is a myth. Agar it was not a myth, then one book should have sufficed. One
Yeah.
motivational speaker should have sufficed. Maybe one in every language would have sufficed, but not, you know, you
Yeah.
consume a
What
lot. Yeah,
Yeah, what I find very interesting is like self-help books come out the most
yeah,
in
yeah,
terms of
yeah, 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 yeah.
publication. लोग और कितनी मदद करोगे भैया, हर साल इतनी किताबें निकाल निकाल के लोगों का चूरन निकाल दिया तुम लोगों ने.
Yeah, exactly. मतलब कितना मतलब stop so a student of mine once said, sir, he thought by reading my blogs that I'm also in that mold, because reading say a few of these last chapters. So I'm like, he's like, sir, I really love motivation books. I read, one a week or one a month. I'm like, तभी तो motivate हो जाओ. तभी तो मतलब motivate होके काम तो start करो. For whole life cannot be मतलब what is Stockholm syndrome जैसा है where you actually fall in love with the self-help process. People watch, so many of my friends watch fitness videos and how to become this, age 40 ke baad ye karna hai. So they'll constantly keep quoting everything, but nobody actually is doing anything. Right?
Yeah,
The book, the motivation book or the motivation video becomes the massage. Your life hasn't changed at all because for that you need to be pushed, as I said, to the brink. And that is the real motivation. What forced you to act. So, and were your life conditions such? Yeah.
yeah. And you know what the funny thing is कि they are motivated enough to read the book but not motivated enough to follow it. So what's the point कि मतलब अरे इतना पढ़ के भी नहीं किया तो मतलब
No,
actually a
that's the
great
whole.
Sufi saint had said that in Punjabi
Mm,
where he
mm.
says, you have read these many books but you've never looked inside.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
I don't know. I just think it's at times it's just people forget the nature part in the nurture nature
yeah, yeah,
cosplay.
yeah,
If you
yeah,
understand
yeah,
enough
yeah,
science, there are nature and nurture both. And I just
yeah.
think some people are just genetically predisposed in different ways. Like
Mm,
in my case, discipline has never been an issue. I've always been
mm, mm.
disciplined. Like I've
Yeah,
always
yeah,
been
yeah, yeah,
disciplined. Like
yeah, yeah,
going
yeah,
to school, I remember in my school days, everything would be prep
yeah,
proper. My
yeah,
school
yeah,
bag would
yeah.
be ready. Everything would be
Mm,
ready. But in
mm.
some things, I just don't get the motivation. But in
Yeah,
other things, I'm very motivated. 3 घंटा रोज पढ़ना है, ये करना है,
yeah.
ये करना है, ये करना है. Once I put my mind to it, then
Right, yeah,
what I have realized is if I make something a routine, then I don't get
yeah,
irritated by it. Then
yeah,
okay, I have to
absolutely.
do it. I have to do it.
Yeah. No, and what you're saying is that there's a friend of mine who's like maybe the most disciplined human being, high achiever. He's a businessman, absolutely puts his mind. But he's like, सब चीज होता है पर फिटनेस नहीं होता है. He's
Hmm.
like, I enjoy and I do everything, but he's like, I just can't exercise. So obviously, again, that news was broken that, hey, now if you don't do it, it's a problem. You're reaching that whatever pre-diabetic stage or whatever it is where you have to do it. And then he thought about his daughter. I think he started. And as you said, usne 3 mahine routine se he did it sincerely. But then he went abroad and that cycle broke. And again, so
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of it, and it's fine. I think as long as we know I'm enjoying this, and that's why I'm doing this. I'm disciplined about it. I don't really like this, but I have no option. I have to, might as well get into a routine and to do it. Which is why I tell my students that when I take a session, that is session का नशा मतलब अगले 3 घंटे में या कल शाम तक उतर जाएगा. Finally, it's you and the books. So
Yep. And
yeah.
like I've always found all these things to be very confusing. Like why people don't do X or why people don't do Y. I just don't know. Like
Mm.
I myself, like, why would I not do this? But I'm so determined to do that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know. I just but before we wrap up, Tony, um to you, what was the one tough thing that you've experienced in your life, either while teaching for CAT or while
Mm.
taking CAT yourself? That's my last question to you. The toughest moment in both.
See, but for honestly, when taking the exam and all, I've not felt anything. For me, it is like playing. It's honestly like that. Even now, I like taking tests every day. I solve puzzles. The second thing in the morning after I read is puzzles that I solve. So that was okay. But in teaching, yeah, I think in teaching, one of the tougher things to become a good teacher is to not to know what to solve, but why is the other person not able to do this? What are the blocks in the mind that is preventing the other person to, and then finding the right way to remove those blocks. For me, that's the real challenge that I enjoy also. Okay, this is what is actually happening with this person, right? That is one. And the second part is, I think, there are ex-students who succeed and there are some who don't succeed, right? To manage their emotions, to speak to them, and be able to, that it's not tough, right? Because they'll come to you only, hey, I just couldn't do it on that day, or so on one side you're really happy for the students, and it happens at the same time. So being these two different people who becomes happy here, and then you have to also yeah, yeah. So that part, but I honestly, Kushal, I keep telling students that these exams are the only thing where you don't need other people, you don't need your emotions. These are purely logical reasoning exercises, whereas we make it an emotional situation. So, which is why for me, real life is tougher, right? Because there are other people, with whom you have to work with, get things done, achieve. Everything is not in your hands. Even at work, there'll be people and people's emotions, right, that you need to deal with, right? Here, it's just pure logical exercise. We make a logical thing emotional, and maybe where you need the emotional portion to understand how to work with people, we make it logical. Maybe itna hi to hai. So yeah, for me, real life is definitely a challenge, and that's what I like to tell people are preparing for exams also. This is the only arena which is a non-emotional arena. Don't make it emotional. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair assessment. I just hope, for me, the biggest thing is, like I always tell people, that sometimes, dealing with the toughest part is not the process. I think it's dealing with the result of the process, and
yeah,
that's
yeah,
where you need the maximum amount of training. And
yeah,
in a less than 3,000 USD per capita society, where the pie is very small, and the kind of pressures that we have, I
mm,
feel, the the pressures are so unfair on the generations that come in. I mean, we
yeah,
we have all gone through it, but yeah, to me, that to me is the toughest bit at times, more than the exam
mm,
itself. Dealing with the pressure of failure, I think that
mm,
is so hard on the. And sometimes you hear the news of students not being able to cope up with the pressure or something of that sort, and then taking extreme measures. Like, I'm glad that you mentioned all these bits in the book, where you have to have a more zen approach to this. You can't take it all the seriously, यार और भी
yeah,
चीजें हैं लाइफ में, एग्जाम ही
yeah.
थोड़ी हुए हैं.
But Kujal, I think एक चीज है which I feel that which is maybe that pressure वाला bit if you have a bit of time, in the sense that we've made it to seem as if there is only like this very small set of colleges that you need to get into. Yeah, there is a scarcity, right? But we've also grown as an economy quite a bit in the last, five. It's not a 20 years back wala setup, right? Where only this will get you, where a graduation didn't get you any job. You have to, either, when I was studying, when my one batch before me, there were no jobs after engineering. Right? As in, people would either do their MS and take the GRE and do the MS abroad, or something else. So there were no jobs. So we are not in that situation. I think the only thing is that don't assume that the colleges are the end. The colleges are just a way, and there is a larger pool, right? There are many people who are successful. I'm not talking about this thing, who have not gone to an IIT but have eventually reached, good places and everything, right? So I think the pool is much larger of colleges and everything else. And the college, because we are a poor, a country which is a developing country, we don't think of career, we think college, right? Which is a problem, which is not the way. So we should look at, yeah, what are the skills do I have, and what I need to get a break, I need to go to school. So everything becomes this. I think one chapter in my book is also like, ABC or nothing is the worst strategy. It's for that only, because we're just trying to, thread the eye of the needle when it's not required. You know, and so people should start thinking about career, thinking about the longer term, how you build something. Because बस college में घुसने से कुछ हो नहीं जाता है. मतलब nothing happens, and you might not also like it, right? Which is why India is the only country where even for stand-up comedy we have a lot of IITians and IIM guys, I suppose. मतलब because यहाँ पे उसके लिए भी मतलब ये degree लगता है, because you get in and you feel that this is not your cup of tea. I think everyone should just broad base it. I didn't take the JEE entrance because I felt maybe it's a bit tough for me. You know, I felt that my assessment was it's a bit tough for me. But yeah, if I do a degree from a good college, it suffices. And I think if parents and everywhere else also can be, I've seen that, if parents can also be supportive and not get very hyper involved into the smaller parts of the prep and everything, and yeah,
Yeah, I just think like it all boils down to the scenario, right? In India, the level of opportunities. Now it's a much better time.
yeah,
People have more opportunities now. When I was growing up,
yeah,
opportunity
yeah,
pool was very small.
yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah,
and I'm glad, the pressures are different today on kids
yeah, yeah,
today compared to that. Yeah, I agree with you. And I hope, the more the economy grows, the less the pressure
yeah,
comes on kids, and I hope we become a more healthier and happier society, because that's at the end of the day, that's
yeah,
what matters. And honestly, making money in an ethical way should be the criteria,
yeah,
not
yeah,
not anything else. And I think people
yeah.
now with more career opportunities have realized that, hang on, I can actually make money doing this. Like stand-up comedy, you gave a great example. Like, who the hell thought that would be a career option?
That would be a great. Yeah, 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 yeah. I
Uh,
think, and it's also the money example is also at times, somebody, one student asked me, said, what should I do, MS or MBA? I was like, what do you mean? Where is the more money? Like, nobody owes you money, firstly. So, if you go to Harvard, nobody's going to sign and give it to you that, okay, Harvard owes you so much money. So, money follows skills. So, you know your skills as an engineering grad. So, where do you think you'll be? Everybody might be a 6 or 7 on 10. Where would you be a 8 or a 9 on 10? Choose that. Immediately said, I think I'll do my master's. I won't do an MBA. So, yes. I think that is something, honestly, again, I don't know whether, Kushal, if it's a function of a developed economy or a mindset. So I met somebody in the US. So 4 years back when I first met, the guy was an auditor. He was that's what his job was. I think he was a CFA or CPA or something, the equivalent of a CA there. And he spent his entire life doing audit. And the next year I went, I'm like, hey, how are you? What's up? He's like, hey, I'm doing sales, man. And so I'm like, how come sales? And I decided I got sick and tired of this. I felt my real skills were that. I'm really good with people. I love talking. I love this. So I took up sales after, say, 20 years of auditing, where because he just feels he has the skills to trade, right? And that he can make a career. Now, is this a developed economy with opportunities? Is it a mindset thing? That is something that's always,
it's a bit of it's a bit of everything. I think it's a developed economy too. It's a society based on
yeah,
freedom. It's a
yeah, yeah,
society
yeah,
based on
yeah, absolutely,
we
absolutely,
are a conformist society. We are a
completely.
conformist society. And यहाँ पे क्या होता है? I am very libertarian leaning. Like,
Hmm,
I
hmm,
am
hmm,
someone who would be very socially very liberal, fiscally
hmm,
very
hmm,
conservative. So which box
hmm.
am I going to fit in, right? I am
Yeah,
not
yeah,
the
yeah,
left.
yeah,
I am not the right. I
yeah,
am
yeah,
both sides. So
yeah,
where do
yeah,
you
yeah.
fit a guy like me? Like, on
Hmm.
social issues, I don't care. Do what you want to do.
Yeah, yeah,
On
yeah,
fiscal issues, I don't want the government in my life. Get the hell out of my
yeah,
life.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
a guy
yeah,
like me is
yeah,
being I don't fit in any box in this country, and
yeah, yeah,
I would fit in a box in maybe a United States of America, in that
yeah,
sense,
yeah,
where
yeah, yeah,
they would say
yes,
a libertarian, leave me the hell
yeah,
alone kind
absolutely,
of guy.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But in India,
absolutely.
everybody wants, and it's like classic. सोसाइटी में एक बच्चे ने कैट एग्जाम क्रैक कर लिया, आईआईएम में घुस गया, अभी सब बच्चे कैट एग्जाम दे रहे हैं. अरे भाई,
Yeah, yeah,
उसको देना
exactly.
चाहिए कि नहीं?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I think it's that's not asked and say. I think if we can start thinking about skills and what am I good at, and now what exams can I take? Because I think the economy is expanded enough Again, it's not like it's not as bad as it was 20 years ago. But if you can give that some thought, okay, what do I want to do? What am I naturally good at? And then you prepare for those exams, for example, right? Maybe not the MBA exam, but the design exam of NID, right? And because that's my skill, I want to design an iPhone, or I want to get into industrial design or graphic design. So I think those options are there right now. It's still not easy. It's not unlimited supply, but one can think about that from a skill level. Yeah, I think that the US as a country, I think that's one thing I like. But there are many things, that I don't agree with in the way the country is set up. But people seem to have a great degree of mobility
Yeah.
with
I
that.
mean, just
Even my
I
Indian
always
friends.
say this, look at the unemployment data. By the age
Yeah,
of 29 in India, almost everyone finds a job.
yeah, 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 yeah,
People don't find a
yeah,
job from 22 to 29 or
yeah,
24
yeah.
to 29. That's the sweet
29.
spot
Yeah,
where they're not finding
yeah,
a job.
yeah,
Now
yeah, yeah,
that is not a marketing problem. That's a
yeah, yeah.
society problem.
Societal
Pe-
problem. Absolutely. Yeah.
मतलब जॉब्स है वो कर नहीं रहे और इवेंचुअली बोलते हैं हाय झक मरा के चल यही कर लेता हूँ.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
So it's
yeah.
like that.
Or,
So there are
and
availabilities in the market. People don't want to do them. And by the time they try here, try there, and then they don't get anything. So that's my understanding. It could be completely wrong.
no, there is also a lot of regional thing in this, I feel. So, for example, in the South, with all the Infosys of the world and all this tech boom and this thing, and even the West, for example, the West and the South, nobody thinks much of government service jobs. Everybody, government service job is not something which is a sought after thing where, you get this, your life is set. Everybody's into the private setup, right? But at the same time, once you move beyond the, South and the West, government jobs become like the most important thing. And people spend a lot of years for that UPSC seat or for that, yeah, Whereas in the South, nobody will spend that much time at all because everybody, or the government job has no value or no glamour attached to it. कि अच्छा एक बार. So I think that angle is also there where people waste many years, I feel, the
Yep.
prime years, running after where there is a huge supply demand asymmetry.
Yep. Yep. I agree.
If you yeah, 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 but it's an interesting country always in
Yeah,
terms
it
of
is.
trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, Tony, it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I had a great time reading your book, and I wish you all the best for all your future endeavors. So,
thanks a
please
lot.
keep writing and all the best.
Thanks a lot, Kushal. It was fun talking to you. Yeah, and yeah, I think looking forward to maybe some other stuff and maybe a different book and a different this thing and catching up.
Great,
Yeah, yeah,
great,
yeah.
great,
Thanks a
great.
lot, Kushal. Yeah, yeah.
All right, guys, we'll wrap today's discussion up. In the description of the podcast, you will see the link to buy the book. So go click on it and buy it. Especially, all of you kids who are preparing for CAT. I think this is a great book. You guys should check it out. Buy it, read it. And what I liked about this book, I'll repeat again, it's small chapters, 3 pages, 4 pages, 3 pages, 5 pages, like stuff like that. Easier. And it's a psychological thing, right? Sometimes kya hota hai, when you read a 30-page chapter, you're like, 30 page. But here, it's a psychological trick. Arey, 3 page ka chapter. Arey, fir 3 page ka. Arey, 3 page ka. It's like, it is literally like a test match. Every session or every ball or every 10 overs or every 5 overs. You got to plan according to that. So I really enjoyed that bit. That there was
And there's
short
lots of cricket.
chapters.
Yeah, there's lots of cricket examples.
Yeah, you end with Glenn Maxwell, man. You end with
Yeah,
Glenn
yeah.
Maxwell.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I feel it's India's language in a particular way. And so when you teach, as a teacher, you're always looking at the best examples. And the moment I give a cricket example, everybody understands. So, yeah, so
yeah,
that's why there's a lot
yeah,
of cricket. Yeah.
yeah. So, guys, do consider buying this book, and all the details will be there in the description of the podcast. And if you want to support the Cārvāka podcast, do consider joining the membership program or buying the merchandise on kushalmehra.com or sending your donations through UPI or Interac. Every single detail is going to be there in the description of the podcast. I will see you guys next time. Until then, namaste. Take care. Bye-bye.